The only real action I heard in yesterday's budget was about raising the tax on private jets. I mean, that's not in a drop in the ocean. Why did you go for the poor employers?
Honestly, this is comical. This is fucking ludicrous.
You couldn't make it up. All of that, think of the poor employer shtick I was doing not 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, literally.
Mockingly, ironically, and this bloody person comes out and does it totally sincerely.
He's a living meme.
Last summer, I voted Labour for the first time in my life because of their message had a singular focus on growth. How does yesterday's budget inspire business confidence and economic growth?
Janet, since you are an employer of hundreds of people, as you say, what was your takeout from the budget yesterday? How do you feel about it?
Well, the messaging so far has been one of prepare yourself, it's going to be tough. So I've been somewhat paralysed with a lack of confidence. And now I have to make decisions about how much of my workforce I keep in the UK or not.
What, because of the increase in employers' national insurance contributions?
It's going to cost a lot more.
And you're thinking...
Why? Okay, but aren't Conservatives supposed to do the whole patriotism thing? Why is it that we skip out on that completely when it comes to, oh, well, maybe I'll just have to employ some foreigners or ship all of my money to the Cayman Islands? Why is that never a self-sacrifice that anyone ever has to make?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's ridiculous that this is never an argument that's made. You know, how about you contribute to the public realm of the country that's made you rich? If you've built your business up in the United Kingdom, you've used the roads, you've used the civil infrastructure, you've used the hospitals, and you've had an educated workforce. That is what has made you rich and made your business successful, is access to that civic infrastructure. How about you give some fucking shit back?
You might actually have to have fewer workers in Britain and have more elsewhere as a result. It's
something I have to consider. In the private sector, we have to make money, costs go up, we've got to balance the books.
Well, Darren, that cannot have been the response you would have...
Hang a minute. If you're making money, then you don't have balanced books. You're in the black.
Yeah.
Those are opposite things, right? If you're making money in profit, that means that your books aren't balanced. You're making more than's going out. If you balance the books by, say, I don't know, having a worker cooperative where all of the proceeds are shared between the workers do the actual work, then you would break even every time because it'd be profit shared, but you don't do that. And you could eat into that profit to absorb the tax increase, but instead you're either firing people, stopping wage rises, or employing foreigners.
Land of hope and glory.
Wanted from the budget yesterday?
Well, look, it was a budget that meets the scale of the challenges we face as a country. The key word on the front of the Labour Party manifesto was change. And it was change from years of chaos from the last Conservative government that you will have experienced with inflation going through the roof,
also,
energy bills going through the roof.
How many sentences in do you think it will take him to say fix the foundations?
Well, I think what's the more likely to come out first? Fix the foundations or £22 billion hole?
Because we've already had a mandate for change.
Yes.
As an opener. I wonder how many of their different kind of election
buzz phrases.
Yeah, we're gonna get.
It's going to be a lot. It's definitely going to be a lot. Because they're just robots. They're all just fucking robots who've been pre-planned.
Tory chaos, Liz Truss, mini budget.
Crash the economy.
Yeah.
The economy spiralling out of control when Liz Truss launched her fiscal and economic discipline back to Britain. But the budget yesterday had to also balance the books for the country in the same way that you have to balance the books for your company. And we had a £22 billion black hole from the last government that we needed.
I promise you I didn't pre-watch.
To fill. We needed to clear the slate clean.
I mean, the OBR, as you say, as the Office of Budget Responsibility, talks about 9.5 billion. You keep talking about 22 billion. They're two different figures, but do carry on.
Sure. And we've published
those are two different figures.
You line by line what the 22 billion pounds is, which you can see, which was released with the budget yesterday. So you can scrutinise the detail.
So what do you say to Janet? Because Janet's a business person. She's actually thinking about whether or not to employ fewer people here and possibly more people abroad as a direct result of your budget, which, and as we know, you talked about growth endlessly before the budget, and you want businesses to grow Janet's thinking she might have to shrink her business here.
Sure, but growth comes because there is confidence in the UK economy. We'd lost confidence of investors and many businesses in the run-up to the last election. So getting a grip of public finances, getting inflation under control, investing in our public services so that workers who are at home sick and can't get an NHS appointment can do so, parents, predominantly mums, that maybe want to work full-time but need to drop their kids off at breakfast clubs can now do so.
Yeah, but answer Janet directly, because there's a real-life example of the effect of your budget on her, and it's not a good one.
Well, the point
Notice how they didn't do this during Tory austerity, bring on like a disabled person and go, answer this person directly. You are fucking this person. Because
Exactly.
that's not the person who they're governing on behalf of, the singular class of people who exist in Westminster.
Yeah, literally, this person who, again, who could make literally any choice to say, well, actually, I'm just going to absorb it out of profits. They could just do that. It's what, 1.7%?
Yeah.
Just under 2% increase in national insurance employer contributions. That's fuck all. It's nothing. That's a very, very small amount of money extra that they're going to have to pay in taxation. And suddenly, immediately, toys get thrown out of the pram. Oh, I'm going to have to downsize my business. By the way, don't believe a fucking word. I do not believe a single word that she's saying there. I think she just wants to keep more of the money for herself because the money is mine. And I don't want us to go and help schools and hospitals. Simple as that. Second Stuart Lee reference of the stream and hit them out the park. Like, at the end of the day, my response, if I was in the audience, would be, I'm tough. Be a patriot. Contribute to your society.
We do, after all, live in a society.
I'm making is that if you look at the package in the whole in the budget, we think there's lots of pro-growth investment and interventions in the country alongside fiscal and economic stability, which is important. But let me go to the tax question head on, because that's the root of your concern, which I understand and empathise with as an employer. We had to balance the books that we'd inherited, and that meant that as a government, you've got to make a decision, you've got to make some choices about how to do that. But we made a very clear promise in our manifesto not to increase income tax on national insurance for working people, employees in their payslip, not to increase VAT that we all pay for in the shops, and for businesses to maintain corporation tax at the current level for the time of this Parliament. That meant that as a consequence of the inherited mess that we had to deal with, we had to look elsewhere, and that's why we had to make the decisions we did in the budget yesterday.
Do you see,
To be fair,
much growth in the budget?
as much as I think that it's all a bunch of recycled buzz phrases, as you say, that's basically the only answer that he can give. Just like, well, we had to raise taxes somewhere, which is true. Like, they had to raise taxes somewhere, and instead of going after VAT or income tax on regular workers, they went after businesses, right? But the problem is, of course, is that he at no point made a positive case as to why that should be. They just said, well, we made this manifesto commitment. And I'm just like, well, yeah, businesses saw increased profits during the pandemic. Workers saw their pay stagnate for the last 14 years, right? Like, we've had an unbalancing of society between the worker and the owner, and that's why we should have rebalanced the tax system to make amends for that.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't. Again, the one thing that's allowed, the one opinion, is that business owners are good and that attacking them is bad. So you can't make the positive argument. You just have to say, we had no choice. That's it.
Exactly. Well, the same with austerity, right? Whereas, of course, the opposite is true. Like, there is no positive argument for violating the human rights of the disabled to balance the books of the country. Like,
no. Janet, I have got every sympathy with you. There is no economy in the world that's ever taxed its way to economic growth.
Nonsense.
And Darren, you're a very clever.
Genuine, like, absolute nonsense. Like, they invite these people on as if they're supposed experts, as if they know what the hell they're talking about with macrofinance. I'm like, well, you may be good at deciding how you allocate stuff in your business, right, to make money. That's not the same as running a macro budget for a whole ass economy. Nonsense. Like, again, why has Norway got higher growth than us for the last 3 years, despite the fact that they are massively higher in taxation?
Yeah, it's a fair question. Again, they started off by saying he started by selling shoes at the back of his van. That's fine. Look, okay, he's built a successful business. Why does that give him like an international economics expertise at all? It just doesn't. I don't know why he's seen as anything, frankly.
Man, but you understand that as well. So my phone was ringing off the hook last night. We help businesses start and grow. And just one example, and I would love to take you, Darren, so you could listen. We should have a cup of tea with Janet after the programme, because I have a friend who's got a business, 30 retail units in the UK, turning over, about £40 million. But the NI, lowering of the threshold and increasing the rate, it's going to cost them £500,000. and the new living wage is going to cost about 800,000. So that's 1.3 million out of his profits. So what does he do? He's saying 3 of my units are now not profitable. I may need to close them. So that means he's going to pay off 90 people. 90 people. Let's just assume half of them find a job somewhere else. That's 45 people who are not paying their tax, who are not paying their NI, and even worse, are now asking for benefits.
Yeah, like, first of all, again, just the same thing as we said before, that there was only one group of people who are relevant in this country. Like, there was no point did anybody say, well, maybe the Prime Minister should sit down with a disabled person. Never a thing that was ever said during the austerity years, right? For a cup of tea, on how this is going to affect them. Whereas this business, oh no, we'll have to pay a little bit extra in tax, oh no. And then second of all, that's not how the economy works. Yeah. Oh, okay, well, if this might become unprofitable, so we might have to close down. But the Exchequer now has expansionary policy to be able to invest in new jobs elsewhere. The jobs are not going away forever. They're moving sectors because the demand is still there. In fact, because it's expansionary policy, the demand is increasing. The OBR's reporting on the budget said it would decrease unemployment. And this guy is trying to say, oh, this means that unemployment is going to go up. Loads of people are going to have to close their businesses and shut up shop. And again, I think that this is an argument that's bollocks. And second of all, I think it's bollocks because if minimum wage goes up, which is what he is saying is a reason why somewhere might become unprofitable, people have more consumptive power. If more people, again, people on the bottom end of the income scale who save very little of their income and spend the vast majority of it, that is more demand, that is more people in the economy spending their money in the retail environment, which literally he is referencing here, a retail company. So they'll have more people able to buy their commodities and therefore make more profits. And therefore will deal with the fact that they're paying more out in wages and in tax. So again, it's just how these very simple microeconomic understanding of how an economy works does not translate to when you talk about the economy as a whole, the macroeconomy.
And just on a sort of a broader point of as a point we made yesterday, if you can't afford to pay your workers £12.21 an hour, you fail. You lose at capitalism. Tough. Like I'm sorry, that's not an exorbitant sum of money. That really isn't.
Yeah. Literally, it's just like, oh, I can't be a business owner unless I pay my workers starvation wages. Tough bloody shit.
So I am extremely worried about this. We have plenty of entrepreneurs you could speak to. Janet is one of them. And we really want you to succeed. But I'm really worried. There is nothing to encourage people like Janice in this budget. But my whole thing is that governments don't create wealth.
Wrong.
Again, that's the one opinion. That's all. I'm not ideological. I'm just believe this thing that's demonstrably not true for my own benefit. And thanks, mate.
Exactly. Again, as we mentioned on the stream when this was last mentioned, right? If the government can't create wealth, how did the Soviet Union massively expand its GDP between 1917 and 1990?
Janet, hard-working people like Janet and entrepreneurs who are willing to risk them.
No, not hard-working people like Janet. Hard-working people like Janet's employees.
Exactly.
Those people create wealth. Work. Yeah, those are the actual wealth creators. Because again, even in the situation of the Soviet Union, it's the workers that actually create the wealth.
True.
But the point being, it's the government directing that process is the suggestion that he's saying that can't lead to wealth creation, which is obviously not true.
To grow, create the jobs, those people pay their taxes and their NI. That's how we grow the tax take. People get caught up in tax rate. The tax take is what pays for the nurses, the doctors, the policemen, the teachers. It's not the tax rate. So I do have sympathy, of course.
But, oh my God.
Also, can you not lump in police officers with those other actually very useful people in society?
It's so frustrating to hear this just like level zero Laffer curve nonsense that this guy's watched on some YouTube channel rather than any actual engagement with economic reality, saying, oh, it's the tax take that matters, not the tax rate. If you increase the tax rate, most of the time it increases the tax rate until you hit the Laffer curve, which may I remind most people, it caps out at 70%.
Completely mucked it up in the end. But if I hear one more time about a 22 million black hole, I'm going to jump in the black hole.
Mr. Whitman from our audience. Woman in the red dress.
Hi, I run a factory in Hampshire. I employ 60 people.
Oh my God, it's just girl bosses tonight. It's just fucking, well, literally girl bosses. Jesus fucking Christ.
And you promised them that you wouldn't put taxes on them. How could you hide behind the business owners of this country and do that to us whilst promising the tax voters that you weren't going to raise taxes?
Oh my God, she's even a Karen as well. How could you? How could you possibly do? Can I speak to the manager of government, please? Like, fucking hell, man.
Taxes on them.
So look, in response to your question, and I totally hear you, and also Tom's point, I agree with everything that you said, Tom. You know, as a new government...
What, when he said he heard nothing about growth in the budget, do you agree with that?
Well, I didn't agree with that bit, but we can talk about that next. But the point about enterprise and
agrees
growth...
with me.
Well, the economy is growing, actually, over the forecast period. But let me just come back to
A teeny tiny amount.
Well, compare the growth rates from before the election to now after the election. It's growing more, but is there more to do? Absolutely. But let me just come to this question of the tax thing, 'cause it's really important, right? So we come into government as a new set of ministers. Now, I'm going to use the £22 billion, but bear with me. Right, £22 billion. Let me use a different number so I can illustrate the point. £10 billion shortfall. And officials say to us, what are you going to do? Are you going to cut £10 billion from public services? Are you going to increase taxes? Or are you going to borrow £10 billion every single year and add to the national debt in order to pay for that? Those are your three choices. Now, on tax, in our manifesto, we made this commitment on income tax, national insurance, and VAT for working people. That's a promise in our manifesto. You can't come in as a new government and say, I'm now going to break the promise in that manifesto this side of the election, because people already think that
well,
lots
as
of
you know,
politicians
some people are saying you
dishonest.
effectively are breaking that promise.
Well,
because
I refute
in fact,
that very strongly.
I
refute
people
it very strongly.
are going to
but the question
experience
is,
the effect of the increase in employees' national insurance in their wage packets.
But the point, with respect, is you have to choose. You have to choose. You can't come into government and ignore the problem. You have to choose.
All right. Well, look, we have lots of hands up. I'm going to come to the rest of you as well. But let's hear what our audience thinks of the choices you've made. Yes, man there in the dark sweater, yeah.
Darren, I don't know why you ring-fenced the NI, VAT and income tax. It's like you did it to make a political point in an election which you were always going to win. I think most reasonable working people would be prepared to pay a bit extra to get the services they want.
Okay.
Well, I mean, this is the point, mate. You're wrong. Fundamentally, we know this because whenever polled, British people will say their priorities are X, Y, and Z, and it's often the NHS or roads or policing or something like that. And then asked how they would do that, would they pay extra to do X, Y, and Z? They would. And then when it comes to the election, they always vote for the anti-tax candidates.
Man in the white shirt and the dark blue jacket.
Yeah, hi. Also a business owner, so I'll join you for that cup of tea.
Jesus fucking Christ. Is it just factory owners tonight? It's literally just capitalist scum as a demographic in this fucking audience.
Great. There's only 27 people in our company, but it sounds like you've upset all of the people that are owning businesses. And fundamentally, where is the platform for growth for
all of the people who are owning businesses? Yeah, the 0.01% of the population who own businesses. Yeah, okay.
Oh, poor diddums. Are they getting upset that finally they're going to be on the sharp end of a state policy for the first time in 45 years? Oh no, I'm so sad.
Have you ever thought about the business? That's how I like to speak to them. Yeah, exactly. Those suffering from affluenza. Yeah.
for our businesses? You've taxed us. Thank you. Now, what do we do to actually grow? My business is growing at 60%.
Well, isn't that on you? Why is it someone else's fucking role? You as the business owner are supposed to grow the business. What am I supposed to do to grow? That's your fucking job. Why are you asking anyone else?
Have you considered cancelling Netflix?
Yes, I hear that avocado toast is very popular amongst the factory owners of Guildford.
Exactly. The bourgeois are very much into their lattes when they could be taking a packed lunch to work, really.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Get on your bike and look for growth.
I mean, MBT2K says, have they upset the factory owner that makes the world's smallest violins? Well, they say that there's no growth measures in the budget, but I hear that the smallest violin business is really booming in the wake of the budget.
Year on year, so we're in a good place, but you've just made it more difficult.
Okay, let me hear from the man in the pink shirt with the glasses there. Yeah.
I mean, the Labour Party made a point of saying they were going to make the people with the broadest shoulders pay the most. The only real action I heard in yesterday's budget was about raising the tax on private jets. I mean, that's not in a drop in the ocean. Why did you go for the poor employers?
Honestly, this is comical. This is fucking ludicrous. The poor, even he had to pause. Even he had to to choke the word out. The poor employers. If they're poor employers, they're not very good at capitalism, are they?
You couldn't make it up. All of that, think of the poor employer shtick I was doing not 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, literally.
Mockingly, ironically, and this bloody person comes out and does it totally sincerely.
He's doing the meme. He's a living meme. Oh, unbelievable.
Over the people who have much deeper pockets. I was very disappointed when I saw that.
The man there in the front with the black sweater.
I think employment law has needed a change, particularly in the probation period for when you start a new job. If you look at across Europe, their rules are a bit more stricter on that, and I think that was something that I actually was really surprised about, that definitely needed some kind of reform, because in the UK 2 years is a long time to wait. Having personally experienced losing my job in an instant and being asked to leave the office, and all of a sudden I've got children, family, bills, thousands of pounds going out.
And as always, it will be just before the 2-year period.
A month with mortgages, etc. What the hell am I going to do? So I can speak from personal experience. It does happen, and I was within the 2-year threshold, and the company said, we don't need to give you a reason, we can just get rid of you.
So those reforms to workers' rights, something you welcome. Yes, yes, you've got glasses there. Yes, the young man there. Yeah. Yep, microphone's over your head.
Yes, it is. I was very pleased to see Labour follow through on their promise to introduce VAT on private school fees, especially if it does help fund state education.
Andrew, that's not something you welcome, though, is it?
Well, I don't welcome this budget, and I completely understand the point Janet made. Local businesses in my constituency, farmers...
They're all, by the way, Janet's now a personal friend of all of these people, probably because they do know her, I imagine. And she's the person they're governing on behalf of, in case you were wondering. It's just Janet. That's it.
Even people who are care workers are incredibly frustrated by what they feel, and they said that they wouldn't increase borrowing. They said their plans were fully funded. And they've done all of those things. They've changed the fiscal rules. They've increased taxes by the biggest amount in peacetime in this country. But that's not the end of it. Because then they went further.
Before that, it was you, of course. It was your government before that.
During COVID, and taxes were falling in our government. But they've also added to the national
hang
debt.
on, whoa. You can't say taxes were falling when you massively increased them and then brought them down a little bit. Well, that's cheating. It's falsehood.
That's going to pass down a burden to the next generation, and as the OBR themselves say, is going to keep inflation and interest rates higher for longer. So it's going to cost people in their mortgages. The fact that they chose national insurance, which is a tax on jobs, not my words, Rachel Reeves' words.
Why did your government increase national insurance then during the austerity years? That was literally one of the first things you ever did in government.
And they increased VAT in the middle of a recession. They put a tax on consumption.
Means that it's often the youngest workers who will pay the price. Those who've been with a firm the longest. Janet, the difficult decisions that you and employers up and down the country make. People feel incredibly let down. Darren, I don't suppose you will, but you should be apologising to people for creating that sense of trust, and then so quickly, after a mere 115 days in office, coming back with what were clearly premeditated plans to raise taxes all over the board.
And do you think you should be apologising, Andrew, for what even the Institute of Fiscal Studies is referring to as the pretty lamentable inheritance that Labour got?
Well, look, every government, I mean, no government gets things right, and I'm more than happy to take...
So literally, it's impossible to do anything correct for the government. Okay.
I mean, if he's describing the previous one, yeah, you got it, mate.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I guess so.
My fair share of responsibility for things that the previous government didn't get right. That's why, no doubt, many people in this room didn't vote for us. They did, like Janet, give Darren's party a chance on the premise that they would stick to their word, they wouldn't breach their promises, and they wouldn't put up taxes. But look, I was a finance director. I spent nearly 20 years trying to balance the books. And of course, the public finances will be tight. They should be tight. because you're spending taxpayers' money. You're making difficult decisions. There shouldn't be any flab in that, but there are always ways...
What about 200 million for bad PPE from your corrupt member of the House of Lords?
Let's not forget Matt Hancock's mate down the pub.
Well, look, if putting it out to tender means anything other than having a chat with a friend in a pub, I don't want to know what that means, okay? Best value case for the taxpayer.
In which you can balance the books. And what we didn't see, we saw lots of borrowing, we saw lots of extra taxes. What we didn't see is any productivity improvements. We didn't see any welfare reform. So you can still have the investment in our public services.
That's just not true, Andrew.
Well, the welfare bill grows by over £100 billion over this plan.
Okay,
and it's one of the things that the OBR calls out.
Let me hear from the rest of the panel. Munira, there were things that I know that the Lib Dems welcomed in this budget, particularly in terms of healthcare.
Yes, and Liberal Democrats campaigned on investing in our health and care services, and we called for an emergency budget to save our health and care services. So we welcome that there has been investment in the NHS. But the big elephant in the room, of course, was that there was nothing on social care. And you cannot fix the NHS if you don't fix social care.
Well, I think this is something we might actually be coming to
Okay,
in a
well,
minute.
all right. So if we...
if there are, what about the rest of the
budget? Coming back to Janet's question, actually, and the other business owners in the audience on growth and what is effectively a jobs tax. I mean, look, let's be frank. The Conservatives left the economy in a terrible mess and public services on their knees. So we were always going to need investment in public services, particularly in our, as I've said, in our health and care service and in our schools. Liberal Democrats set out a whole raft of tax measures during the election campaign where we could have raised some of that money a lot more fairly. This rise in national insurance is a jobs tax. 2/3 of it will be paid by employees, by lower wages and people being laid off, as we've heard from the various business owners in the room. It is going to penalise small businesses. And what really worried me is when you look at the forecast for growth from the Office for Budget Responsibility, it doesn't go above 2% in the forecast at all. Yes, we need to fix our NHS and care service to get more people into work to boost growth. We also need to radically reform the business rate system to support our small businesses because at the moment it is terribly unfair. But the other big elephant in the room, of course, is Brexit. And this government won't, like the previous government, do anything to repair our broken relationship with Europe. Seriously.
Oh, Brexit.
It's nothing to do with inequality or the ruinous legacy of austerity that these fuckers propped up. No. Go back into the European Union, solve everything.
It would.
Getting growth back. We have got to start to repair our relationship with Europe. But Keir Starmer, as even in the long term, has written off any idea of going back into the single market. We know that's hit growth by 4%. I've got businesses in my constituency. One premium cycling business lost 25% of its business overnight as a result of Brexit red tape. They've tried to fill that gap again. But how much more could they have grown if they hadn't had that impact?
Craig, what was your response? I mean, we had Rachel Reeves said before the budget, taxes are at 70 a year. I don't have plans to be a big tax-raising chancellor. Quite a lot of tax.
Well, Janet, I'm not an economist, but what I did hear in your question was about what you were told and then what actually happened. And I do think that that is a major issue in this. So you say, I don't have plans to be a big tax-raising chancellor, Rachel Reeves. The Labour manifesto, we will not increase national insurance. None of my plans involve major tax rises from Keir Starmer. I think that's problematic. And I think what you're hearing from a lot of people is, is the government actually telling us the truth? Is it actually telling us being loose with language? Or if you're being uncharitable, does it sometimes feel like it's slightly gaslighting us about this kind of thing? It has been...
So it's funny how he started off his answer with, well, I'm not an economist. Okay, well, shut up, move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing you say is of any relevance.
Thank you for telling me your lack of any proficiency in this topic. Moving on.
Some of the things it's going to be doing and what it's going to be saying, and then it seems to be pulling back from that. And I think the other big problem with this, I think, that's going on here is Any government needs to be able to say what it's doing it, why it's doing it, how it's doing it, and who it is for. And I think this government's really struggling with the big vision thing. We had 120 days where there was a massive vacuum and there was lots of doom and gloom going on. We were told this was going to be a budget for strivers. We've heard from all the small business owners here tonight saying that there's a problem with that. And I think that this government is really struggling to say to people, what is it actually going to do and how is it going to be when we get there? So there is a trust issue here. Keir Starmer did tell everybody he was going to be different. And a lot of people, I think, have got a big question mark and saying, are you going to be different? Or are you actually just going to say what is necessary to get into power and then change things afterwards?
Dan.
Look, I refute every single accusation of dishonesty. And if we have time, we can go through them absolutely line by line. But the thing with this budget is it was an honest budget. It was.
Notice how they're the ones being laughed at now? Changed, hasn't it?
Again, they could have just been truthful. Like, it's frustrating because whilst there were no lies in the manifesto, what the dishonesty wasn't explicit lying. They didn't say anything like that was explicitly wrong. That was lying by omission. Was the dance that Ash Sarkar was talking about on all of those months ago in June before the election. Like, she predicted they would do exactly this, and that's what they've done. Like, they could have just told people they were going to do it. Like the Green Party, we said, raise taxes, increase borrowing, invest in the country, become more social democratic, right? That was our pitch to voters. We didn't have to lie about it or omit that was our real plans all along.
Also, I'm loving the Barney colour scheme on this person on the right.
True, agreed.
It was an honest budget about the inheritance from the Conservatives. It was an honest budget about the poor state of our public services. It was an honest budget about how much it costs to get a grip of public finances.
But hang on a second, Dan. So when Rachel Reeves said, I don't have plans to be a big tax-raising chancellor, and tax is now going to be at record levels, how do those two facts go together?
Because this budget's trying to do two things. It's trying to clear up the mess that we inherited, that you, me, Parliament,
no, I get that, and you said
OBR.
that, but I'm just talking, you refute all
So
things that you've been saying. But how can both those two things be true?
Well, because you then have to deal with the reality as you find it when you come into government. And look, colleagues here are calling for tax cuts or more spending. All of these things have to be paid for. How would you pay for them? And look, to be fair to Andrew, and we've worked together for many years, I'm very fond of him.
Not entirely reciprocated.
I'm a nice guy, right? I mean, I'm fond of Andrew. We work well together on the Science and Technology Select Committee. And he knows what he's talking about, because Andrew was Economic Secretary to the Treasury when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. And what happened then, Andrew?
I knew it was going somewhere. I knew there was going to be a butt on this one.
Or the OBR, when you sacked the permanent secretary at the Treasury, when you announced £45 billion of unfunded tax cuts, when you sent the market spiralling, mortgage rates going through the roof, and completely discredited your party and the economy. That is the mess that we're having to deal with. That's why this is an honest budget. Did I want that inheritance? Absolutely not.
Well, you may well have wanted.
Okay, that was pretty powerful, to be fair. That was
absolutely.
That was some riz, as the children say.
I think he's not wrong. He's entirely not wrong. But again, there was just no honesty about the state of what was going to have to happen during the election campaign.
And we shouldn't just look backwards, Darren, because you are in government. And
That's why we're making the choices.
No.
We shouldn't look back on my record and the things that I've done and hold me accountable for any of it. No. We need to look to the future now.
No, that's not right.
What's your choice? What would you do instead?
You inherited.
What would you do instead?
You inherited.
What would you do instead?
I'll let you rant.
Well, tell the audience your choice.
You inherited an economy.
You
inherited an economy where inflation had come down from 11.1% to 2%, where interest rates.
Yeah, but you were responsible also for the 11%, surely. Like, you fucked it up. The fact that you then corrected it, you still fucked it up. You still damaged the economy enormously. Thank you.
It has to work either way, right? Either you're not responsible for the original inflation, therefore you're not responsible for it going down, or you're responsible for both. You can't have it only be responsible for the good thing and not the bad thing. Personally, from the inflationary analysis that I've seen, they're not responsible for either, as far as I'm concerned. The war in Ukraine and COVID backlogs and disruption of supply chains is most of what we saw with cost push inflation, and then these things filtered through the economy and then ended. It's a really good video by Money and Macro and Unlearning Economics about how this happened during the pandemic period. And therefore, you can't claim credit for either of these things. You can tell the public we couldn't do anything about the rise, and then say, well, it's falling now, but we're not going to take any credit for it. And that would be reasonable, but they're not reasonable.
were falling and we were able to bring taxes down, and we presented balanced forecasts to the OBR.
That's not what the OBR said.
On the current fiscal rules that had good
He's heckling.
The OBR said there were figures that were not clear to them.
They said it was materially different because you were not transparent about the state of public finances.
No, that's
the language of the OBR report. I've just quoted it.
It's simply not true. And the OBR,
It is true.
The OBR speaking on the Today programme this morning on the BBC talked about how nobody should be using their figures and their words to legitimise what Darren has been talking about. In fact, there's no mention of 22
but you're
billion
using their words to legitimise what you're talking about. So let's just call a halt.
I mean, I think she's right to call a halt to it for one very specific reason that I'm going to say, though, is that all we're doing is having the oracles at the OBR say this. Well, how about we talk about people's real lives? Talk about fucking living standards. Imagine if the line hadn't been blah, 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 Liz Truss. It had been, we've seen the biggest drop in living standards since the Napoleonic Wars. And they say, oh, well, growth is back in the economy. Couldn't give a shit. Don't give a shit whether there's growth in the economy. Don't care whether the budgets are balanced. I don't care what the OBR fucking say about any old shit. I want to know, are people's living standards going up or down? And the reality is, under the Conservative government, and for the last 14 years, living standards have been shit, but especially under the previous one, we saw the biggest drop in living standards since the Napoleonic Wars. And until the Conservatives, as a political party, grapple with that fact and what they've done to the country, they will never, ever, ever, ever get back into government.
Yeah, and so far they've learned nothing. They're about to elect Kemi Badenoch. I mean, they're going full culture warrior, blah, 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 even though it clearly doesn't work and no one cares. And it comes down to it, like even people who ostensibly agree with you aren't going to vote because someone's taking a piss in a toilet you don't like them taking a piss in. That's not a thing that affects people's lives.
Halt there for a minute.
Hey, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.